Okay, good. We'll get started now. Like I said, my name's Taylor. I'm the Greenhouse and Learning Center Coordinator with Equal Ground. We are working on building said greenhouse and learning center, and I will essentially be, that'll be my station. So I'm working on education and programming here with Equal Ground, and I'm so excited that you're joining us here. So this is part 2 of a 4-part series where we're we're going over the basics of garden planning, and I'm going to help you guys go from executing like your planning all the way up to planting your plants in the ground. And then throughout the season, Equal Ground's going to be doing various in-person and virtual workshops to cover all different topics, associated with gardening. I think we're having potentially one more issue here. So I'm just going to give it a second before I share my screen. So I was just mentioning, if you were here for the February 15th, part 1, we recapped garden planning, where we actually sat down and sorted out, we figured out what to grow, where to grow it, how to obtain the seeds, and actually designing your garden space. And then today we're going to be going over seed germination, seedlings, and some actions that you can start taking in your garden. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get started. Okay. Can everybody see this? Thumbs up. And can everybody see my cursor? Kat, I can see you, so if you can give me a thumbs up. Yeah, you can see my cursor. Okay, perfect. All right, so welcome. Too fast. All right, so today we're going to be going over part 1 of the Let's Dig In series. We're going to be going over seed germination and growing your seedlings, some tips associated. We're going to go over timeline, so what it actually looks like to create a time of when to actually start your seedlings. We're going to go over some garden prep work, basic equipment considerations, and some garden journaling prompts. So just to recap what we went over on February 15th, again, this is on YouTube, but just search Equal Ground Community Gardens, and you'll be able to find the 2023 Let's Dig In series. You'll see the graphic that we've been using on social media and the registration page. You'll see that graphic there, and you can go ahead and feel free to review that, recording. So we talked about how to identify growing space in your backyards. We talked about choosing what to grow, how to obtain your seeds, where to obtain your seeds, and how to read your seed packets. We talked about designing your garden space and all of the considerations associated, such as sunlight, drainage, stuff like that. And we also talked about the importance of garden journaling, and I gave you some prompts. So I'm just curious, if you guys were here for February 15th, did you guys have a chance to sit down and create a garden plan or purchase any of your seeds? And if none of you are here, that's totally okay. Like I said, if you haven't already taken some of those steps to put a plan together and to, oh, I'm just getting some chat messages here. Carly says, thanks for the reminder, ordering tonight. Absolutely, send me a message if you need any help. Yeah, a garden book to have. We'll talk about garden journaling at the end, but honestly, I just have like just a dollar store notebook where I write everything and anything that I can. We'll talk about garden journaling. So again, if you guys haven't already made a plan for your garden or obtained your seeds, this is something you're going to want to do immediately. Seeds are starting to pop up in the hardware store. If you'd like to purchase the Mackenzie seed packets, they actually have new branding now. They look quite nice, but they do look different. I suggest, getting started on your garden plans and get those seeds, because some of them are going to need to be started this month. Ooh. Okay, let's get into it. So seed germination is the first step in a seed's life cycle. So after a period of dormancy, water and temperature are going to prompt the seed to sprout. You'll see in the bottom right picture here, these are bean seeds, and the moisture has allowed them to come out of dormancy and break through their little shells. And you see that they have tails here. So essentially, this is what that tail will push right into the dirt, and it'll push this pod up. And then all of this green that you see is going to be the start of the first leaves. So seed germination is that actual process to get the seed out of its dormancy. And this is also what the process looks like in an outside setting or in a soil setting. So when we're starting seeds inside, we're actually mimicking spring's weather to get the process going. Regardless of where those seeds come from, we're trying to apply the same conditions that they would experience if they were started outside. So there's 6 ingredients that you need for seed germination and growing your seedlings, and we're going to go over each of them. So the first one is obviously seeds, soil, containers. You need light, water, and temperature. So the first one, seeds. Again, this is something that we went into depth on February 15th. We talked about different types of seeds, different strains, and also different places that you can purchase them. So the most important part when you're purchasing your seeds is that actual seed packet and the instructions that are on it. And you're going to hear me mention this many, many times throughout this presentation. The back of your seed packet is the instructions to get that seed going. And specifically for seedlings, you want to pay attention to the days to germination, the seed depth, the timeline, so how long it's actually going to take, like when you should be starting them from your frost date, the temperature it requires, and the light conditions it requires. So if you're starting seeds inside, these are seeds that typically, like plants that typically don't fit within our growing season. The most common that you think of are tomatoes, peppers, cut flowers, and any other plant that you're going to want a head start on. When you're figuring out what seeds you actually want to start inside, you're going to want to also take a look at the available space that you have to grow. And we'll be going over those conditions. And once you figure out how much space you actually have, that's when you can figure out what you want to start inside and what you maybe just want to wait for to start outside in spring. And that's called direct sowing. So that's the second way you can, get plants in your garden. So direct sowing are seeds that you're going to put directly into your garden in the spring. These are typically any plants that have taproots, like carrots or beets, or anything that grows, the fruit grows under the ground. These are plants that experience transplant shock, so they don't really do well going from a small container into the ground, or they really don't do well from going inside to outside. So typically you can just save the hassle and plant them directly outside. Any plant that grows really, really quickly, like lettuce or arugula or spinach, you should just be planting them directly outside instead of doing them inside. And anything that requires you to sow a ton of seeds, like beans, typically you would just do them outside. So soil, this is your second ingredient. There's a couple different options for soil. These will depend on your preferences and also your knowledge level. So the most common is an actual seed starting mix that you can use to get your seedlings going. This is an almost sterile mix. It doesn't really have any nutrients in it. And the intention is actually just to be a medium to deliver water to the seed. Once that seed gets moving and actually pokes through the soil and is usually about 3 inches tall, you either need to up pot it or you need to fertilize it. Because it started in a mix that really doesn't have any nutrients, it's eventually going to need to be supplemented and fed, or else it's going to be stunted and ultimately die. So when you're using a seed starting mix, it can be a little bit more hands-on, but ultimately it's the most kind of foolproof way to get your seedlings going. If you're a little bit more of an intermediate grower, or you're a risk taker like me, you can start your seedlings directly in a nutrient-rich mix. So this is any mix that already has the organics and the compost in it that it needs. It's full of nutrients. It is less hands-on, so it typically means that you don't need to fertilize very much, if at all, or you don't need to up pot. However, there are some risks such as mold or fungi, and you have to ensure that you have really good airflow and you don't overwater if you're choosing to just go straight to a nutrient-rich mix. Some gardeners will also choose to make their own blend. Honestly, the soil that you buy is typically just a mix of peat, compost, and perlite. Sometimes there's other additives in it, but ultimately the bare bones of it are those 3 ingredients. So if you really wanted to dive right in, you could consider making your own blend. I wouldn't say it's the most cost effective, but it does give gardeners a little bit more control over what's being exposed to their plants. And if you're doing it on a really large scale, it could potentially end up being cheaper. I will mention from a sustainability standpoint, peat moss and sphagnum moss are non-renewable resources. So peat is grown in what are called peat bogs. And when those peat bogs are mined, they're completely depleted of their resources, and it takes hundreds of years for that to renew. So essentially they're non-renewable. So coco coir has become very, very popular in recent years. It's made from coconut husks, and it's a bit more of a sustainable option. So sometimes you'll find gardeners who are mixing coco coir, compost, and then either perlite or pumice, which is like a volcanic rock that just helps aerate your soil. Let's have a couple chats here. When I make a blend, do you still have risk of the fungi and mold? So if you're going to make your own blend, ultimately, the more bacteria you're introducing with that compost, the more riskier it can be. So if you personally haven't done seedlings before, like you haven't germinated your own seeds or grown seedlings, I don't know if I would recommend going straight to your own blend. But if you have a little bit of hands-on experience, honestly, gardening is all about trial and error. But anytime you introduce any type of bacteria, you're always going to risk, issues. The biggest way to combat that is to ensure that you're watering correctly and you have really good airflow. Airflow is going to allow, obviously the air to move around. Nothing's going to sit there and get gross. Give your soil a little bit of time to partially dry out before you continuously water. The biggest issue that I find with fungi and mold, I'm actually experiencing it with one of my plants right now. I'm doing I can't pronounce it, please don't make fun of me. It's my first year doing it though, so it's all trial and error. Lisianthus, I think they're also called Lyses, and they take forever to grow. So I'm constantly spraying the top of this soil. And in the very beginning, I didn't have very good airflow because I got too lazy to hook up the fan. And I have a little bit of, it almost looks like moss growing essentially. So the plants are still hanging on, but it was a risk that I took by going straight to a nutrient-rich soil mix. And now I have airflow and things are looking okay. But anyways, anytime you introduce bacteria, which is obviously found in compost, you're going to risk that risk is always going to be there. So our preferred blend, not a blend, I guess, our preferred product, I personally use the Pro Mix Vegetable and Herb. This is simply from a capacity standpoint. I don't have time to up-pot hundreds of plants or to fertilize hundreds of plants over the course of 2 months. It just simply isn't possible for me. So we plant directly into Pro Mix. Ultimately, it's going to be your choice. Again, if you're a beginner, I suggest starting with the seed starting mix. It's why it's there. It's widely sold. You could walk into Walmart or Home Hardware, Home Depot, and purchase a mix that's specific for seed starting. And then something else that I'll mention, last year, we decided the Pro Mix can be a little bit hard to find, but in case anybody's interested in trying it, you can get the big bags from William Dan Seeds. I only figured that out this year though. So last year we decided to switch to a different blend for no good reason other than the Pro Mix was a pain in the butt to find. And it simply didn't have enough nutrients, and I didn't fertilize anything because, again, I just don't have the capacity to take that on. And hundreds of seedlings almost died. And I realized almost a little bit too late that they needed fertilizer. So I ended up feeding them, but ultimately it was a mistake that I made by changing something that was working for me. There was no reason for us to change it. So if something works for you, stick with it. If seed starting mix has always been your go-to, stick with it. If nutrient rich soil is the way that you want to go, perfect. Gardening, again, is trial and error. So for us, this is our soil mix that we prefer to use, but everybody does things differently. And ultimately it's going to be whatever works for you. If you're a beginner, I suggest starting with that seed starting mix. Let's see, why aren't you moving? There we go. Your third ingredient is the actual container or vessel that your seedling is going to grow in. So the first thing to consider is, what do you actually want to put it in? And my first suggestion is check your recycling. You're going to find yogurt containers, takeout cups, old Rubbermaids. Those are a great place to start. They're food safe. Might as well reuse them. Some gardeners will choose to use egg cartons or Jiffy pots. Both of those are paper-based, and you can either peel it off when you go to plant them, or you just plant them directly in the soil with the paper base on them. I personally don't like that. I've seen some plants struggle in the Jiffy pots because the roots can't break through, but they're very popular and widely sold, so that's something you could consider too. You could use old nursery pots. A lot of nurseries in the fall they often have like really big bins that you can come grab. They're nursery pots. Some of them are damaged, but it's better than nothing. And then there's also a little bit more advanced way of doing. It's actually no container. It's called soil blocking. So I'll show you guys a photo in a minute, but it's this big rectangular press almost, and you pack it really tight with soil and you push it out, and it creates these little soil blocks. It looks like Wall-E. I'll show you in a second. It's really cool. Also avoid food-based containers such as eggshells. There's a photo you'll see of citrus fruit shells people will plant in. Those are typically going to bring pests. They're going to get moldy. It's just going to be a pain in the butt. I don't suggest it. Carly says ice cream molds I see all the time equals mold. Yes, that's going to disintegrate in a second. If anyone's had, one of those cheap ice cream cones from like McDonald's, that starts to disintegrate by the time you get to the end of it. So imagine if you had water in that over the course of 2 months, that cone's going to be gone within the first day. So if it seems too good to be true, or if it's a food item that typically is going to disintegrate, just don't suggest it. I mean, ultimately it's going to break down on you, and you're going to have a problem. And again, you're risking pests. So for size, if you go too big of a container, you're going to have mildew and mold issues and drainage issues, where the roots aren't going to reach down into the soil below, and the water is just going to sit there and get mucky. If you go too small, the plant's going to become root bound, and it's going to need to be up potted. So root bound is when the roots literally have nowhere else to grow, and it can really negatively affect the plant. You're also going to want to avoid tall containers. And if you have something way too tall and you've put the plant halfway up it, that's going to shadow the plant, and the plant's going to have an issue getting light, and it's going to become very leggy. So ideally, to start, you probably want a pot between 2 to 4 inches. Every plant's different. Again, this is where you can refer to your seed packet, or you can do a quick little Google search. Drainage. So it does not matter what container you are using. You need to ensure that it has adequate drainage. Do not skip this step. Drill holes into the bottom of whatever it is. If it's a yogurt container, it needs drainage. It's a takeout cup, it needs drainage. Without drainage, you're risking the entire plant. You're risking those mold issues, the mildew issues. There's no way for the excess water to go anywhere, so it's going to fester and get gross. If you're using any sort of reused container, you want to ensure that it's clean and dry, especially if it's an old nursery pot. So for me, I have this massive gross pile of nursery pots behind my garage that I pull from, and I always clean them before I use them, because if the plant that was previously in there has any sort of disease or pest, it could carry over to your new plant. And seedlings are very susceptible to damage, so you want to do everything you can to keep that clean and avoid any cross-contamination. So when choosing a container, a really good chance to practice sustainability, reduce, reuse, recycle. Again, see what you have in your recycling bin. I've been collecting yogurt containers all season. I have a pile of them that are clean and ready to go. I just have to drill holes in the bottom of them. And I also use, I wish I had, oh yeah, I can show you. I don't know if you guys can see me, but I have old disposable plastic cups, and there's just holes in the bottom that we drilled, and I use these year over year. It allows me to keep an eye on the roots and see if there's any moisture buildup. They're nice and clear, so I really like using these. And again, I just use them year over year. We haven't had any of them damaged yet. So, and here's some examples. Some of these are do's and some of these are don'ts. So up in the top left, if anyone's familiar with tropical plants, we call these the plug of death. I'm very into tropical plants, and sometimes they'll arrive and they'll look really bad. So you'll go to clean up the roots and move them to new soil, and you'll find these plug around the roots, and it's actually completely bound the roots, and it's very hard for them to break through this material. So if you're given the option to use this, I highly suggest not, because when you go to plant them, you're actually going to have to completely remove this material. It's going to be very messy. So avoid, material plugs like this. Right here in the middle, we have pop bottles that have been repurposed. I actually love this idea because, again, they're clear. You can kind of see what's going on. If you have kids, it's a good learning opportunity. And then also there's a little reservoir down here for water, which gives you a good opportunity to bottom water, which we're going to talk about. Up here, there's, again, that citrus peel. I do not suggest doing this. This is going to mold very fast. It's going to get very gross. Eggshells, this in theory is a good idea, but it's truly just not big enough, and your plant's going to very, very quickly outgrow it. And again, it's really hard for you to get nice edges, so you can tell this is messy. There's just a little bit of soil everywhere, not ideal. There's a takeout container here. This is a really good idea. Just keep in mind that this might get a little bit mucky over the course of 2 months. It actually looks like there's a Venus flytrap in here, which is interesting. We'll see how long that lasts, but this could get pretty mucky. And then there's toilet paper rolls here, which is very similar to the Jiffy pots or the egg cartons. It's a great idea. It's something that you have in your house. Just keep in mind that they can get a little bit mucky, but it would make for easy planting. Bottom left, we have milk jugs, which I guess aren't widely available here, but you'll find that some advanced gardeners will use these for what's called winter sowing, which is probably something we'll do in the future, but they'll essentially fill it up and throw seeds in it, water it, and then throw it outside, and they'll just naturally grow as spring approaches. But you could also consider using jugs like this for planting, or even the bottom half of milk cartons you could consider. Right here we have Keurig pods. I actually love this idea. I think that this is wonderful. My only concern is that they're probably a little bit too small. This might be a good opportunity if you were going to use a seed starting mix. You could use these, and then once they get big enough, around 3 inches, you could pop them into a bigger vessel with some nutrient-rich soil. And then down here on the bottom right, this is the seed blocking that I was talking about. So back here is the actual seed blocking mechanism. You fill this part with a bunch of soil, you pack it in nice. You can tell that the soil is very, very wet, and then you press it out and it creates these little wally looking blocks. I think it looks so cool. It's something that I'm personally going to be trying this season. I haven't yet. You just pop your seeds in the top. This is a little bit more of an advanced way of doing it because you have to be careful with watering to make sure that they don't fall apart. And you also have to make sure that if you started your plants a little too early and the roots are starting to get a little bit crazy, you don't want roots growing into the next block, because then it's going to be an absolute nightmare to pull them apart. And also with this method, you have to do what's called bottom watering. So just like up here, you essentially flood the base of wherever the container is, and then the actual soil will suck it up through the drainage. So for this type of vessel, you would have to bottom water. The fourth ingredient is light. This is probably one of the most important ones, and also one of the most challenging ingredients when it comes to starting seeds inside. This is actually what can be a barrier for some people. So when seeds are actually germinating, so when they're moistening and they're breaking out of their little shells, they usually need darkness. Some of them need light though. And that's again where that seed packet's going to come in handy. So for example, I just germinated snapdragons, and those needed direct light in order to germinate. So they've been under light for probably 2 weeks now, and they're finally starting to pop up. Once seedlings poke through the soil, they usually need 14 to 16 hours of light, which as you know, we're probably getting 8 to 10 hours right now in the dead of winter. So that can be a big problem for some people. There's typically 2 ways to get your seedlings light. One is putting them at a south-facing warm window. The only problem with this is if it's not enough light, your seedlings are going to get leggy. They're going to start stretching or growing towards the light and the direction of wherever it is. And that's going to make for a very weak seedling, and it's likely not going to develop well. And then you could have issues when it's planted outside. If you actually look at the middle photo, you can actually see, so there's a light here, and the seedlings are quite tall and very what's called leggy, and they're growing towards the light. In this exact scenario, this is what you don't want to see. They're growing, they're growing sideways essentially, and because they're stretching towards the light, it means that they're really not receiving enough. On the left, there's a photo of, I don't know if that's Brussels sprouts or kale, something leafy. The light is very, very close to the plants. So when we use a window, for most people, it's okay as long as you have that south facing warm window. But if you start noticing your seedlings are stretching, you might need to be rethinking your setup. So that's where grow lights come in. And grow lights are a little bit of a can of worms, and it can be an investment. But if you know that you're going to be doing seedlings year over year, this is something that you're going to want to consider purchasing. If you do, you want to purchase full spectrum lights. LEDs are the best, but they can be pricey. However, in recent years, they've really come down in cost. I personally invested in some more LEDs this year, and ultimately I probably spent $80 for 8 lights, which is quite a bit. Most people don't need 8 lights. But Amazon, although I don't love recommending Amazon, they have some good options. And then also your local garden centers, even Walmart has grow lights. They ultimately don't need to be big strips of lights. They could be a light bulb like this. You can purchase literally light bulbs that will screw into your lamps, but they need to be positioned very strategically to make sure that your plants don't grow in that direction like that. In the image on the right, same thing. It actually looks like these plants are being bottom watered. You can see that there's liquid in the trays below them. And again, those lights are quite low to the plants, and they're not stretching. These plants aren't searching for light because they're receiving it where they need it. So if you know that you're going to be doing this year over year, really consider purchasing grow lights. It takes away a lot of the stress. And again, it doesn't need to be an elaborate setup. You could get a strip light, and you could even put that underneath your cupboards in the kitchen, and you could leave your seedlings on the kitchen counter. You could find a bookshelf, or you could do them on like a utility shelf. I know it's easy to get caught up in what you see on social media with these really beautiful, elaborate shelves with lights everywhere and knickknacks. It's ultimately, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be very simple. Andrea said, how close to the light should the plant be? That's going to entirely depend on the plant. Ultimately, you really want it as close as possible. And then you want to try, as the plant grows, you want to try and move the light back. It can be a little bit challenging depending on how you, what your setup is. But in the case of the picture over here on the right, I imagine that this is a shelf where you can lift and lower these lights. So if you have any way to lift up these trays higher up towards the lights, and then as they become bigger, slowly move them back down, that's probably going to be the best. If you're noticing that your seedlings start to stretch, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Just bring them closer to the light and they'll likely right themselves. It's once they continue to stretch as they grow, that's when you have a problem. The fifth ingredient is water. This is obvious, right? So a couple ways to water. What I personally prefer to do is mist the top of the vessel with a spray bottle on the mist setting specifically. When you're doing this though, you do have to be generous to ensure enough water is getting down into wherever the seed is. Because some seeds, for example, they need to lay on the top of the soil because they need light to germinate. Some seeds need to be 1/4 inch deep. Some seeds need to be 1/2 inch deep. I like using the mist option just so it doesn't disturb the seeds. The second way to water, as I mentioned, is to bottom water. So that's where you're going to take the vessel and you're going to put it on a tray like a baking dish, for example, and then you'll flood the baking dish with water. And through those drainage holes you made, the medium's going to soak up however much water it needs. The nice thing about bottom watering is usually you can water less because when you're misting on the top, you're not penetrating every inch of soil. But when you bottom water, the soil's sucking up as much water as it can. So ultimately with bottom watering, you don't need to water less, but you do need to pay attention more to how much liquid is in there, just so you don't overwater. So when you're watering any seedling, you want to, at least for the first couple weeks until they're 4 or 5 inches tall, actually 5 inches is too tall. I hope they're not 5 inches, but once they're 3 or 4 inches tall, you want to avoid watering cans and you want to avoid direct spray settings. So, when you have a spray bottle and you can twist the end to either spray directly or you can turn it on the mist setting, make sure you're leaning towards the mist setting because you're either going to blow or flood the seeds or you're going to damage small seedlings. That water, that pressure can be a little bit too much. If you do choose to soil block, you want to make sure you're bottom watering only because if you're squirting those little Wally cubes, they're going to break apart and you don't want that. If your growing situation is placed near any of your vents, obviously we're in Canada and it's winter, so our heat's blowing right now. You're probably going to need to water more just because there's going to be a lot of airflow and heat potentially hitting your soil. Everyone needs water. So I personally check my seedlings 3 to 4 times a day, and I'm usually spraying them 2 to 3 times a day. If you don't have that much time or that much dedication towards your seedlings, that's totally fine. Consider bottom watering, but make sure, especially in those early days, that you are really, really paying attention to your seedlings. And because if they dry out completely, you could experience root rot, where essentially the roots have shriveled up and they have no way to take in moisture, and then they end up dying. You could also experience wilting. Some plants will quite literally show that they're thirsty, and specific plants can't actually come back from that state. So water is one of the most important pieces of this. Make sure you are dedicated to being able to stay on top of watering requirements. And the final ingredient that you need is temperature. Some people don't always think about this as an ingredient to growing, but when you look at your seed packet, it's going to tell you, what temperature those seedlings prefer. Ironically, I don't think the Mackenzie packets have temperature, but that's okay. Let's see if these CoComelons do. Yes, so the CoComelons say provide a warm soil temperature of 24 to 27 degrees Celsius. Ultimately, I don't actually take temperature of anything. I typically just think of it as warmer and cooler, but check your seed packets because it's probably going to tell you. Ultimately, we're mimicking Mother Nature and we're mimicking the environment that type of plant comes from. So if your seed packet indicates that it needs cooler temperatures, you could consider a basement, a drafty window, or the garage. So this year I'm doing snapdragons and they like a cool temperature in order to germinate, but they also need light. So I put them at the very front of my house in a cold room near a drafty window until they got going, and then I moved them back to where the rest of my plants are. If they need warmer temperatures, you can typically just put them in the warmest room in your home. If you do have a vent nearby, you don't want it directly spraying on anything, but or not spraying, blowing on anything, but you could have it situated closer to the vent, but then keep in mind that you have to water a little bit more. You could also consider purchasing a heating mat. This is like a heating pad essentially for plants, and they can be very cost effective, $15 to $20 depending on where you're purchasing them from. It's exactly as it sounds. You plug it in and you place your tray or your vessels on top of it, and it will help keep warmth in your medium. If you want to take it a step up, you can get heating mats that will also connect to thermometers, and they'll have a little probe that you can stick in the soil or you can stick underneath your tray, and it'll keep track of the temperature to make sure that you're not going over or under. This is really common for more complicated plants or plants that cost a little bit of money, like cannabis. Typically, growers want to make sure that those seeds have the perfect conditions in order to germinate, because it could be expensive to replace. So if you have something that you really want to see germinate well and you're willing to put the time and money into it, consider getting a heating mat that actually has a temperature probe attached to it. So now that you know exactly what you need to get your seeds started, let's talk about just some general tips for growing and caring for your seedlings. When you're filling your containers with soil, don't aggressively pack it into it. Don't press it down. It's essentially going to remove any air pockets that you have, and then your roots are going to have a hard time looking for oxygen. And it's also going to have a hard time moving around in really packed soil. The only time this doesn't really apply is when you're doing soil blocking, which is with that weird a piece of equipment that I showed you guys with the Wally blocks. The nice thing with soil blocking though is that there's so much liquid in the medium that as it dries out, it leaves those air pockets and there's a little bit more room for those roots to grow. So just make sure you're not packing your soil really aggressively into the containers. Another tip, this is coming from a personal place. Pre-moisten your soil before you fill your containers. Last year, I filled all of my cups and yogurt containers with soil, and then I sprayed them all down and let them drain. And I lost about 25% of growing space because I did that. At the time, it was just time saving, I felt, but ultimately I ended up losing a lot of growing space. This year, I'm actually moistening the soil before it goes into the containers because I can plant directly right away. I don't have to wait for that soil to become wet because it can take a little bit, especially if the soil was super dry prior. So pre-moisten your soil before filling your containers. You're going to save yourself time and you'll be able to actually utilize all the space you have. If you're using that sterile seed starting mix that I mentioned, or you notice that your plants need to be fertilized, typically you'll start to notice yellowing or the plant will actually stop growing. Typically it's telling you that it's out of food. You're going to want to start fertilizing every week. Typically this starts when they're about 3 inches tall. The recommendation is a 1-to-1 ratio mix. So that means 1 nitrogen, 2 phosphorus, 1 potassium. Typically, if you walk into any garden center or hardware store, they're going to carry organic fertilizers for seedlings. Every fertilizer is going to indicate that 3-number ratio. Different plants require a different ratio. Essentially, that ratio are the macronutrients that plants require. So just like humans require fat, protein, and carbs, plants require nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And depending on the stage that that plant is at, that ratio is going to look different. It's going to depend on, is that plant a little baby or is that plant ready to fruit? So make sure you're looking for like a seedling type fertilizer or something with a low ratio. Seedlings typically need more phosphorus, which is why that middle number is higher. If you're using that nutrient-rich soil, you may not have to fertilize until later in the season, if at all. It's going to depend on what you've used. I personally, when we do use the ProMix vegetable and herb, we find that we don't need to fertilize. Sometimes our tomatoes and peppers need it towards the end, but typically everything else is fine. If you're using that nutrient soil, you could consider adding airflow. As I mentioned, airflow is going to help you combat that mold and mildew issue that can settle on top of your growing medium. Another thing that airflow is going to be really beneficial for is, we're going to talk about this in April and also a little bit later in the presentation. Before your plants get planted in the ground, they have to go through a process typically called hardening off. To take a plant from inside and to put it outside directly in the elements in the sun, it's going to die. It's going to get really overwhelmed. So leading up to planting outside, we'll take the plants out for a couple hours a day, increasing that time every day. We'll expose them to wind, maybe some colder temperatures, some direct sun, because even if you're using grow lights, sometimes it's not enough. So when you add that airflow inside, it's allowing your plants to grow and it's mimicking wind. So you're going to have stronger seedlings. Their support systems are going to be stronger because they're used to being thrown around. So if possible, set up a fan near where you're growing your seeds and you're going to notice a pretty big difference. Keep the soil moist and stay on top of watering. As I mentioned, if you're letting the watering task go, you're going to experience root rot, wilting, and then if for some reason your plants do make it to planting, they're not going to be prepared for outside because they weren't really taken care of inside. So outside's going to be too much for them. And then another tip is to actually consider starting challenging seeds in a moist paper towel. I love doing this. So I take, either seeds that I'm experimenting with or seeds that I really want to watch that germination process, and I'll put them in a piece of material. You would probably want to put them in a paper towel. I'll moisten the paper towel, I'll slip it into a bag and I'll put it somewhere warm. I'll check on it twice a day just to see how it's doing. I'll spray it down with some water and you'll actually notice out one side of the seed, a little tail will break through and it'll start to grow. It's really, really cool to watch. If you have kids or you're really interested in seeing how that germination process actually works, I suggest trying this out, even if you don't actually have intentions of growing the seeds. This is my favorite way to grow a lot of items. I actually have pawpaw seeds here. I don't know if you guys can see them, but they're quite big. They're about the size of the end of my pinky, I'd say. And I actually got these from somebody who's on this call right now. Her name's Carly. She gave me some pawpaw seeds. These are a native fruit bush, I think, from Ontario. They produce a fruit called pawpaw. It tastes like mango versus vanilla pudding. It's really yummy. So I've stratified these. Essentially, I put them in dormancy. And now I'm going to put these in a wet towel, essentially, and I'm going to see if I can get them to germinate. And because I want to watch the process, I'm not going to do it in the soil. Yeah, if you have kids, I highly suggest doing this. It's such a cool process. I'm absolute nerd for it. We just have a comment here. Oh, Carly says so good. If you guys ever get the chance to eat a pawpaw, go for it. And if any of you want pawpaw plants, if I get these germinated, I'm happy to share. They do grow quite big. I think from the research that I did, it was about 5 feet. But oh, they were so delicious. And I have quite a few seeds here. So if anybody does end up wanting any, shoot me a message. We got another question here. Has anyone tried growing marigolds? Yeah, so marigolds are very, very common. This is something that we'll talk about later in the series, but marigolds are, first of all, they're beautiful. They're really good for pest management and they're super easy to grow. And Kim, you will be getting marigolds as the garden champion for Princess Anne Park. And I'm also happy to share some seeds with you too, if you want to try growing them. That goes for anyone. We have tons of marigold seeds here at Eagle Grounds, so we're happy to share. Carly says, I believe I have more pawpaw seeds if anyone is interested. So she can either give them to me and I can try germinate them, or we can actually give them to you guys if you want to try. Again, I have absolutely no experience with growing pawpaws, so it's going to be a trial and error for me. But if you guys are interested, join in on the fun. They're really delicious, but they'll probably take a couple of years to develop. Okay. Whoop. Okay, timeline for starting seeds. This is really, really, really important. Again, I've mentioned this about 1,800 times. Check your seed packets. So for this case, this is a tomato seed packet. It very explicitly says start indoors 6 to 8 weeks before last frost. This is a parsley one. And yeah, so this one doesn't indicate an actual date, but it does indicate that germination can take 3 weeks or more. So that immediately flags to me that, like, start those sooner rather than later. Check the back of your seed packets. If you're really unsure, do a quick Google search to see, when typically you're going to be given a number in weeks, and you take those weeks and subtract them from the last frost date for your area. Here in Brantford, in Zone 6B, our last frost date is May 5th. However, any good gardener here, not any good gardener, any gardener that wants to play it safe is going to consider May 2-4 weekend instead, because typically down here we do kind of experience a little bit of frost throughout May, and then if you're on any like gardening groups, you'll see everybody scrambling to find different ways to protect their plants for that frost. So for this area, most people are starting their tomatoes and peppers mid to late March. Everything else is mid to late April. If you don't have grow lights and you're relying on your window and the sun to help you grow your seedlings, you could consider starting a little bit earlier, because your plants are going to take a little bit longer to grow because they don't have full sun essentially. And if you're just unsure, Google it. Google's amazing. It'll give you a very quick answer on when to start your seeds. And again, those seed packets, guys, these are gold. I also mentioned hardening off. So this is going to happen typically during the month of May, and we'll talk about this in April. But yeah, this is also going to be an important step to make sure that your seedlings are ready to go outside. Joan, you'd said, I'd love to get a few pawpaw seeds. Absolutely, we'll make it happen. We'll connect with you after. Just before we move on, I want to just mention something again about these seed packets. When you're done with these, keep them. Keep them for the season while you're growing the plant, in case you need to refer back to anything. as your garden journaling. You can come back and you can indicate what type of seed it was, what type of tomato it was. Did you like the brand? Did you not like the brand? These seed packets, guys, they're gold. Keep them even if there's no seeds in them, at least for the season. It's going to be really, really handy for you. And, every company is different. Every type of plant is different. You're going to want to really keep these. Please, I'm begging you. You won't regret it. Okay, garden work for March. So typically, it's getting a little bit warmer. We're getting some plus degrees in. If you're living in Brantford, you're also getting whammed with snow. I know you're really itching to get outside, and the second you have a nice day, you want to get out there and start moving things around. But if you value your pollinators, do not touch your gardens during the month of March. So pollinators actually hibernate in our garden waste. So in our leaf litter, our mulch, and even the top layer of your soil if it's chunky. And if those pollinators are woken up before we have flowers, they do not have access to food. And it can be very detrimental. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we're so quick to clean up leaf litter and to make our lawns and our backyards just beautiful looking, but ultimately it's really having a massive impact on the pollinator population. So if you value those pollinators and you want them to stick around and pollinate your fruits and vegetables, then do not touch your gardens. Regardless, it doesn't matter how badly you want to get out there, just avoid moving things around. If you're planning to start early crops, which is something we will talk about early April, so things like lettuces and carrots, stuff that you want to put directly into the ground when it's still kind of cool out, you could find a clear section of your garden and try not remove those potential snooze pockets. Maybe there's one part of your garden that's covered in a lot of leaf litter. Maybe find another spot where maybe there's some exposed soil and just hope and pray that there's nobody down there. Some things that you can do, you could consider start pruning and trimming your perennials and your fruit trees. So typically this is done pretty early spring before everybody starts waking up. Make sure you do your research before you start cutting, because every plant is different in how far back you want to cut and also when to cut. Some plants, it's better for you to wait till they wake up, and some it's better if you wait before they wake up. So you could consider to start doing some research into your perennials and into the different trees you guys have. This is also a great time to start assessing your equipment from last year. Does anything need to be sharpened? Does anything need to be fixed? Do you need to buy anything? Take account of what you have and what you need to obtain. And then if you missed the opportunity to plant your bulbs in October, November, now is a great time to do that. So onion, garlic, and other bulbs, they typically need a frost or two before they can get going. So if you miss the window to plant these items in the fall, this is the perfect month to do it before it starts warming up. So some equipment basics. If you're a brand new gardener and you're starting from scratch, you really don't need much. Year over year, you will feel the call to purchase more equipment. That's okay. But really to get you started is if you need compost. So if you're using, existing soil that's already in your backyard, you can consider rolling some compost in that just to give the plant some nutrients throughout the season. You may need some cages or a trellis. So tomatoes specifically will grow up. They need some sort of support system, whether that's a tomato cage or a big piece of rebar that you tie up. If you're growing beans or cucumbers, you're going to want to consider getting, identifying a spot or getting a trellis for those items to grow up. You're probably going to want some gardening gloves. Some people go without. I personally can't. When that soil gets between my nails, it just starts to hurt. So I typically will go with gardening gloves. You're going to want a full-size shovel and a trowel, which is a mini shovel. Again, just to save your fingers, because some plants you will need to plant them pretty deep. And then you're going to want either hand pruners or sterilized scissors. I highly recommend having a sharp pair of snippers of some sort, specifically dedicated for your garden. This is because you want to make sure that you have a way to clean them between and they're not exposed to pathogens that could be passed to the plant. So hand pruners you can purchase a fairly good cost, and they're pretty they fit in the hand pretty well, so your hand's not going to get too tired. Or you could just use some sterilized kitchen scissors. Just make sure that And again, we'll go over this later in the series, but make sure that you guys are cleaning whatever you're using to cut the plants with between cuts, just to make sure you're not passing any bacteria or any pests or anything. So this season, I personally have already done the work to figure out what equipment I need this year. I know I need hog panels because I'm going to make a squash arch this year. I know I need a handle replacement for our big shovel because I quite literally broke it off with a shovel last year. I know that I need new hand pruners because my partner keeps stealing mine. And I know that I want to purchase some quality gardening gloves because I keep ripping through mine, and I want to see if maybe I can support local or find a more sustainable option and try and see if I can find a pair that will actually last me more than one season. So for beginners, go ahead and figure out what equipment are you going to need to make the season happen for you. And for people that are a bit more seasoned or have, gardened before, take assessment of the equipment you have, see what needs to be replaced, see what you do want to purchase this year, and start looking out for those things because they're going to start popping up in stores. And between me, you, and Jesus, ultimately, sometimes those things get marked up the further into the season we go. So consider purchasing those sooner rather than later. Okay, garden journaling. We're just about wrapping up here. If you were here in February, then you would know that I really push garden journaling. Winter 2024 will thank winter 2023 you. So garden journaling literally just means recording anything and everything relating to your gardening, recording plans, germination rates, successes, failures, tricks, equipment favorites, your favorite content creators or resources that you found, community contacts, people that that you can rely on. So you record your whole season because next year, when you don't have to start from scratch every single year. Like I said, gardening is truly, truly, truly trial and error. And my way of doing things is not going to be the same way of Kat's doing things. Like everybody does things differently, and what works for you may not work for me, and vice versa. So make sure you record what is working for you and what's not working for you, so you have something to fall back on next year when you do this again. So for March, I have a couple prompts for you guys. These are some good things to start writing down as you're going through some of the actions that we talked about today. So a timeline for each crop that you're growing and when to start each seed. If you actually come up with a plan now, you're not going to be scrambling in April going, oh crap, what was I supposed to start this month? So sit down now or whenever your seeds come in and actually figure out when these things need to be started based on those incredibly useful seed packets. You're going to want to write down germination success for each crop. If you planted 10 cucumber seeds and only 2 of them germinated, what happened? What happened to the other 8? Was it something that you did? Could you try doing something differently next year? Or maybe you had 100% success germination rate and you think whatever I did worked. Make sure you write down what you did. Any problems or questions you have during the early growing process, you're likely going to forget them within 10 minutes of them coming across your mind. So write them down so that way you have a chance to sit down and actually research them at some point, or call somebody or call a friend, or pop onto your favorite Facebook group. And then take note of when your growing space comes alive. This is more of just a mindfulness thing. And I love spring. Spring's my favorite season, and sometimes winter can be hard. So it's nice to go out into my backyard every morning and start noticing birds and insects and pollinators that start moving, and some perennials that start waking up. And I love when the trees start budding, because then okay, spring's on its way. So start taking note of these things. It's going to bring you closer to your growing space, and it's also going to be useful for next year when you're like, oh, when does the tree usually start doing this? Or I know I need to prune this guy. When did he wake up last year? So yeah, these are just some things that you guys could consider growing or writing down. Okay, our next session is on April 2nd from 7 to 8. It'll also be on Zoom. We're going to be going over sowing and succession planting, and we have special guest Nancy Lee. She is a master gardener of Grand Erie, and she has done other workshops with us, so you may be familiar with her. She's absolute wealth of knowledge. She's amazing. So she's going to be covering sowing early crops for our zone and best practices. So like we talked about, lettuces, carrots, beets, things like that. Succession planting, which just ensures that you have a harvest the whole season. Harvesting techniques for spring crops. We'll talk about real garden prep once the pollinators are awake. And then we'll also go over some more journaling prompts. So just 4 key points for you guys, and then we can have a discussion if you guys have any questions. Our Equal Ground does have a Facebook group. You're welcome to come join it. It gets pretty active in the spring. You can always use us as a resource. So join the Facebook group, see what other people are doing, and start connecting with local community members that are also gardening. Those essentially are going to be more useful than any Google search is. Equal Ground is hosting a fairly large Earth Day Community Building Festival on April 22nd. It's going to be down at Earl Haig Community Garden. We do have an Facebook event page that you guys are welcome to go take a peek at. We are still accepting vendors, clubs, organizations, teams, public figures, performances, and volunteers as well. So if you want to get involved, absolutely reach out. There's also various applications on our website. And then if you don't want to be involved, but you want to attend, come join us. It's shaping up to be a really, really fun day. And the theme is Earth Day, so you can come and learn about everything that your city has to offer, while also learning about, how people celebrate the Earth. And then the crazy greenhouse situation that we've had going on, City Council will be discussing the issue this Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Feel free to join us in the gallery at City Hall. I will be there. Our board members will be there. And I did send out the agenda. If anyone doesn't have a copy but wants to review it, send me an email after and I'll send it to you. It's a very good read. And we're hoping to have a solution after this council meeting. This is again Tuesday at 6 o'clock. And then, of course, Equal Ground is always looking for volunteers. If you guys want to get involved in the organization, all of our community gardens are looking for volunteers. We're going to have a lot of different workshops this summer. So, there's a million ways to get involved. There's also a lot of back end work that goes into Equal Ground. So if you have a particular skill that you want to share with us, we would absolutely love to have you. Okay, that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And then if you guys have any questions at all, I know it's 8 o'clock now. So if you have to hop off, that's totally okay. But I will stay here. And if you guys have any questions, yeah.
Thank you for putting all this work in, Taylor. Like, that was super, super informative. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you that don't know our team, Caitlin here, she's actually our president. I'm so glad you were joining us tonight. And
Yes.
then Carly Sortis here is also on our board. So these are 2 of our 9 board members, I think. You've probably seen them around, and if you haven't, you'll get to know them. Carly says, I'm definitely not watering my seeds enough. Thanks for this, Taylor. Honestly, you're probably not. At least check on them twice a day. I water mine, I don't know, 2 to 3 times a day. It just depends. Also, different plants take up water differently. So those seeds, those Lissi seeds that I was telling you guys about that are developing like literal moss, those I typically only need to water once a day, whereas like my onions, I have to water like 4 times a day. So every plant's different. So just, it's, if you're planning to grow seedlings, it is hands-on. So just make sure that you're, looking at them and inspecting them and learning how they're growing. If you write down, oh crap, these tomatoes needed way more water than these cucumbers, write that down so you know for next year.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this will be my first year starting seeds inside. And I have a cat. So I bought one of those, metal frame stands, and it comes with the plastic cover on it.
Oh yes, I have right here. I know exactly. You're talking about one of these, right?
Exactly like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, exactly like that. So I'm very excited to try this.
Yeah.
In terms of airflow, I mean, I have a cat. I need to keep her away from, she loves to nibble. I do work from home, so I have that benefit. But in terms of getting airflow going, so is that a situation where I can pull the cover off, for a couple of hours during the day and maybe put it under my ceiling fan type of thing? Or
So this is my first year with these. I was gifted 2 of them. We also, like at home, I have really big, like 8-foot tents that I use. In those cases, we've always put a fan in the tents, or we have an exhaust system that we use. This is my first time growing in these, and what I'm personally doing is I'm getting a small fan, and I'm actually just gonna clip it that way. I'm gonna clip it up there. I don't know.
Okay.
This is hard. I'm gonna clip it up there, but the difference between, like, the reason I'm doing that is because I am using really, really nutrient-rich soil, and I know, especially with the way that some of my seeds are going right now, I know that there's going to be, if I don't have airflow, I'm gonna have an issue. If
Right.
you're gonna use seed starting mix, you could have a different experience. So, have you decided what soil you're gonna use?
Well, I got all excited and I ordered, Coco Coir and
Oh,
vermiculite
nice.
and
So here's what I
perlite.
suggest. Yeah, that's awesome. Here's what I
So
suggest.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know now after listening to you. I'm not sure that's the way I'm going to go, but
It's okay. Here's what I would do. I would still mix it, but I would only put very little. So I have lots of tropical plants here. I make my own soil mix for my tropical plants. It's not that hard. Don't be scared of it. The
yeah, no,
biggest thing is knowing, yeah, the biggest thing is knowing how much fertilizer to add to it. So
right.
when I do my tropical plants, I actually add worm castings because they don't need that much fertilizer. So if you're going to make your own soil mix and you know you might not have the best airflow, I would start with leaning on the side of less compost than more. And then if you're noticing that they need to be fertilized, well, you'll probably have to fertilize them as they get bigger. But at the very least, if you start with a more sterile mix, like with less compost, then you're likely not going to need the airflow,
Okay.
at least not as much. Yeah, you'll probably be okay.
And where do I get my compost?
This is also a good question. So the city offers free compost. I think it's starting May 1st. Last year, I had a hard time getting it personally, so I started making my own compost. You can either get it from the city. We also, Eagle Ground will have compost for our like gardeners and stuff like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Are you a host gardener with us?
Yeah, I am. So I've
Yeah,
picked it
so
up before, but I'm just
yeah,
wondering
exactly.
for starting inside.
Yeah, so you could honestly just grab some fertilizer from a department store. Typically you can buy it in bags. But ultimately for seed starting, you could consider just purchasing worm castings, or even just try without fertilizer and see how it goes, or just pick up a small bag of it from the department store.
Okay, so just buying a small bag of compost or worm casting?
Worm castings. So I get them from Home Hardware on King George.
Okay.
Yeah. Or if you know somebody locally who has worms, which is something we're actually going to do a workshop on it this year. So if
Ooh,
you guys are interested,
that's
if you know
exciting.
that somebody that has worms, just be like, hey, can I have some of its poop, please?
I was wondering if that's what castings meant.
Yeah, it's worm poop essentially. So
Okay.
it's a really good composting option, and we want to explore it as a group this year. So we'll do a little workshop on it.
So I'm wondering if that's okay, because we have a lizard and we feed it mealworms. So I could take the waste from them or no? Would it have to be
I would
earthworm?
I would do some research on it first.
Yeah, yeah.
I think the worms that Cheryl had and she passed on to Jennifer were red wigglers.
Okay.
So there's different types of worms. Kat's shaking her head. She probably knows more about this than I do.
I just know it was red wrigglers. That was it. And then
Yeah.
like you can even just put them directly into your garden when that time comes too.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Joan says Black Sparrow Living Soils, which is fairly close to me actually. They do have different compost lots.
Thank
They're
you.
really good for making your own soil mixes because they have a lot of like bulk ingredients. So they're in Brantford too. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Joan.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. Anybody else have any questions?
Taylor, I have two.
Yeah.
Can we just go back to the marigolds for a second? Do you think that I could start marigolds in the paper towel
Yeah.
and baggie? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have success in a couple years ago with them. And then my other question is more in regards to the actual beds at the garden. So what we've done in the past is because we have a truck, and I get dirt for us,
Mhm.
I just use some of that dirt. Like I just had it dumped in the back of my truck. We went, used what we needed at the gardens, and then brought the rest home. The other thing is I was able to get free manure, so I did that also 1 year. So is that something that we should be doing on a regular yearly thing, is
Mm.
topping up our beds with manure, and I get triple mix, is that
Yep.
okay?
Yeah, so
Mm.
typically triple mix, manure, anything with those words are essentially what you're looking for. This is a little bit of a loaded question, and we talked a little bit about this in the last session too, and we're going to dig into this in May. But whether you amend your beds is going to be determined based on how you grow. So there's a couple different ways to amend your beds. The first one is if you're just classic grower, you have soil in a garden bed, then yeah, you need to mix some sort of amendment with it, whether that be compost or triple mix. You need to turn it into the soil before you plant. Another way to amend your soil is to plant what's called a cover crop. So this is typically from the bean family. You plant a bunch of seeds at the end of fall for winter. It grows over winter and it puts nitrogen back into your soil. And that's another way to do it. In that case, you do not need to turn compost into your soil. The third way is using permaculture practices, and we will have a presentation on this later. Permaculture is essentially mimicking the way that nature grows. So obviously, nature isn't like rolling compost into its soil. So permaculture is personally what I do. And my entire backyard is filled with mulch. And under that mulch is like we don't pull our plants out of the ground, we cut them so they disintegrate or they decompose into the ground. We don't fertilize anything, we don't pour anything into the soil, and we essentially underneath that mulch we have living soil. So there's a lot of different insects, and essentially that mulch is slowly breaking down, and all of the other stuff that was in the soil is slowly breaking down. The only problem with permaculture is you can't fertilize with synthetic fertilizers. So essentially, those are the typical 3 ways of keeping your soil healthy. In the case of the community gardens, we roll compost into the garden beds every year, either in the spring or the fall, you can choose. Typically, if that's how you do it, sometimes towards the end of the season in August or September, you have to add more compost on top of the plants because they could start to run out of nutrients. So like
So
I
a
said,
question about compost. Do you guys have issues with weeds in that because my understanding that the city compost is what they pick up from the city
Mhm.
and it's taken and broken down. So does it turn around in your beds and create issues with weeds and things like that?
This is a better question for Kat, but ultimately, the way that all compost is made is unless the plant matter, this obviously doesn't apply to the city, this is more background composting or backyard composting. Unless the plant matter is diseased, it's being composted. And when it's composted, it's heated up to the point where in most cases, nothing can germinate from it. And it's broken down to the point where nothing can germinate from it. So technically, weeds are not supposed to grow from that. But ultimately, you could get weeds with anything. You can get weeds with freshly ground mulch from trees. Like weeds can pop up from literally any situation. Kat, do the community gardens typically experience weed issues? Like I was at Buck Park this summer of 2022, and we didn't notice like a massive issue. It was just standard. We went out and weeded every so often. A lot of crabgrass because this area is terrible for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't have to add anything else to that, Taylor. That was, I've never had or like experienced it in the last 5-ish years that I've been with the community gardens. It's just like your standard weeds, but nothing
Mhm.
like too crazy that no one's been able to not handle it.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, you always see people from the city be like, "Oh, the city's compost mix, it's full of weeds," but like that's really hard to one avoid, and two, like it can literally happen with anything. You could order a load of triple mix from a reputable supplier and it could have weeds, but that's not the supplier's fault, that's not the soil's fault, it's just nature, right? And essentially if the weed, lived through whatever process that it was designed to live through that process, and nothing can help it. So if you like personally, again, this is something that we will talk about in a future event, permaculture practices specifically. If weeds are something that you don't like or you struggle with, permaculture is for you. Kat, you said you have to go, no worries. Have a good night. I'm gonna ramble at permaculture. It's the most sustainable way to garden. We don't get weeds. This past summer, we had, everything was covered in mulch. We had no weeds, we had no pests. I struggled with nothing. So it's because I'm such a busy person, I need to have a fairly hands-off growing situation, and that includes my seedlings, and that includes my gardens outside, because I can't be in the gardens for 4 hours a day. But if weeds is ever a concern of yours, I highly suggest looking into permaculture practices. There's an entire movement of that way of gardening, and it's just stepping back from our classic agricultural ways and applying, essentially mimicking nature. I also want to show you guys my my paper towel solution if you're interested. Kim, did you have any questions? Or
I just want to say that my husband's actually doing the mulch thing in my backyard, and I haven't been paying attention. So as you're talking, I feel
It's okay. It's probably
hilarious
made a
it's
difference.
happening in my backyard, and my husband's doing it, and I'm like, oh, this is actually sounding very familiar.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in looking into mulching your backyards, what we did is we called a tree company and we said, next time you're in our neighborhood, can you drop 7 yards of mulch on our driveway? We paid the driver $50 just for, the convenience of dropping it off. The only problem with mulch, and this also applies to our community gardens, you have to move that mulch same day or it's going to start to break down. One day we left that mulch for probably 4 days, and then we actually went to move it, and the inside was like steaming, like almost on fire, steaming, because it was breaking down, and it becomes very, very hard to move if it's left. So if you guys are interested in, maybe adopting more of a permaculture way of growing, consider mulch. Just keep in mind that you need to spread it quickly, and it does have to be topped up every few years. It's not a one and done type situation. The mulch does break down ultimately as we want it to. So every couple of years, you may need to find yourself topping it off. So yeah, if you guys want to see, the reason why I don't use paper towel anymore is I'm a super low waste person. So I sewed myself these little pockets made of flannel. Paper towel, Carly shows up when I say zero waste. Paper towel.
Time, I swear, I'm just like, as soon as I'm interested, I need you to know, like, I'm still here. I've been paying
It's totally okay. Paper towel is a perfectly good solution for this option. Again, it's really fun when you have kids. I love watching stuff germinate. It's like, I'm obsessed with it. I come check on these multiple times a day. So I have these little like Chinese food takeout containers, and they're labeled. I have numbers on them. So in my garden journal, I keep track of what's in what. And I have these little pockets, and the outside of them is black flannel and the inside is white flannel, so I can see the seeds. And I essentially put the seeds in this little pocket and I keep it moist. I only do this for seeds that are going to germinate with like maximum 7 days, or else they're going to get moldy. If they're going to germinate, if it's going to take longer, you need to do them in soil. But I essentially put them in here. I put the lid on, I label it, and then this goes on top of my heating mat. And I get to watch them germinate. And then when they're ready to go, typically when the tails are 1/4 to 1/2 an inch long, I go and I put them into soil. So the soil, you always want to put it tail down. So the little white thing that comes out, you want that down in the soil. And then I just lightly cover it with soil, and then it'll slowly come up. I like this because I'm in control of how many plants I have, and I'm not wasting, because you can use cell packs for your containers. I'm not wasting cell packs, especially in the really big ones, like the 128 cell packs. I'm not wasting spots because something didn't germinate. So this is very hands-on. I don't suggest doing this for everything. And I'm a little bit excessive when I grow. I love this stuff. So, but if you have kids, or again, you have something that you've been having difficulty with, I've done this with marigolds, great success. It's just a little bit more hands-on. It takes a little bit more time. I think this is what keeps my seasonal depression away. So try it. It's a lot of fun. And again, like, even if you don't have intentions of planting whatever's there, like it's fun. Kids love it. And it's a good way to, like, again, I have these pawpaw seeds. It's a really good way to keep track of what's going on. I can keep track of any mold issues, stuff like that. Somebody said, I bet the top of the fridge would be a nice warm spot. Yes, it probably would be, as long as there's no like drafty window up there. It'd probably be pretty warm. Me personally, I have a shelf above my my stove. For some reason, the house didn't come with a vent yet. We're putting one in. I also sometimes will put stuff on top of the stove, and that's pretty warm as well. So yeah, just find a warm spot, and yeah. Does anybody else have any questions? Oh, Joan put the link for Black Swallow soils in the chat if anyone's interested in checking that out. The owner, Lou, super knowledgeable. She also spearheads a lot of really amazing initiatives within the city. So if you guys are into sustainability or environmentalism, the whole company and everybody that runs it and supports it are really cool resources.
How can we get a hold of some pawpaw seeds?
You want some pawpaw seeds? Message me. I think you have my email, right?
Yes.
Yeah, send me an email, and me and Carly and you and anyone else who's interested will coordinate. I think I have 12, and I only want one that's germinated. So my intention was to germinate all of them and then see who in the community wanted them, or give the seeds out. And yeah, I definitely don't need more than one of them. So I have 12 here, and then Carly is pretty sure she has some too. The only thing is, Carly, the ones that you have probably need to be stratified before they can be grown.
Does that mean put them in the freezer?
Yeah.
Okay,
If I were saying do it, put them in the freezer. Yeah.
you told me that a while ago, so I did do that.
Oh,
That's where I
yay.
just need to like make sure nobody threw them out from the freezer. But I think Joan also mentioned that she wanted some. So Joan, if Taylor has your email, that would be awesome as well.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
do they also
Cam.
have to be scored?
Bye, Cam. Have a good night. Thanks for joining us. So I personally don't feel qualified to speak to the scoring piece of things. I know that some seeds that have a really hard membrane need to be scored. I personally haven't researched germinating these yet. I've just had them on like standby, ready to go. I don't know if somebody else here has more experience on scoring seeds, but these might need to be scored, and I will look into it before I actually start them, and I'll share any information that I find with you.
Yeah, I got some last year or the year before. I think it was the year before, from somebody here in Ontario, and they didn't take. And so when I saw him offering them up again, I asked, and he said, "Oh, you probably didn't score them, did you?" And I was like,
Oh, interesting.
"No."
Do you remember stratifying them?
No.
Do you know what that means? No. So that's probably why they didn't germinate. So every seed, especially native seeds to Ontario, especially milkweed, even milkweed that you buy from like in a seed packet, has to be stratified. So any seed typically that's native to Ontario and obviously other places, stratification is essentially forcing the seed to go into dormancy, because when you think about it, when seeds are like released into the wild in the fall, they freeze, right? So they have to go through a period of dormancy. So I remember last year I kept trying to germinate milkweed, and again, this is milkweed that I purchased. Typically when you buy seeds, they're already germinated or they're already stratified. I was trying to germinate milkweed, and it wasn't working. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And then I learned it doesn't matter where you buy your milkweed, it has to be stratified. And then I learned further that sometimes everything needs to be restratified. It really just depends on when it was done, because that dormancy like effect, I guess, can wear off. Cheryl was talking to me about it the other day. I didn't realize, I thought most items just need to be stratified once and that was it. But that's not the case with most plants. So in this case, just stratify them. There's a million ways to do it. The best thing to do is really just to keep it stored like outside in a shed or something. That's the way that Cheryl does it specifically. The way that I did my milkweed this year was I put them in the fridge for 30 days, but they can mold easily that way. Honestly, the best way, my opinion, just toss them in the freezer. Like, I don't know, some people would probably disagree with that, because it's not necessarily like a foolproof way, but just from my perspective, with the mold issues that the fridge can create, I personally will put them into the freezer. But I'd like the pawpaw seeds were done in the freezer. But yeah, if you're finding that something isn't germinating at all, like nothing, it's likely because they need to go through that dormancy.
Okay, thanks.
Joan asks, is there a good source for milkweed seeds? Honestly, I would just ask your neighbor. Post in a local gardening group and see if anyone has any milkweed seeds. They're very common to find at seed swaps, which is something we're hoping to host soon. And like I have lots of milkweed seeds that I'd be happy to share. They're typically, lots of people will harvest them because they're, you know, such a precious resource. And then honestly, every seed company has milkweed seeds. So Mackenzie seeds, which are the ones that you typically find in the department stores, they'll have milkweed. We talked about Vessi seeds in the last session. That's where I got some milkweed this year. So I got some swamp milkweed from Vessi's. And then my partner's boss, who like pretty much runs a farm, he shared some milkweed seeds with us. So I've had really good success with those this year. You can get them everywhere. Yeah.
I have another question, sorry.
Yeah, of course.
I was gifted a large quantity of like vegetable seeds, which is great. But what I'm understanding is they need to be used up, right? So yeah, like I can't hang on to them for years and years, right?
No.
So that would be a good thing to bring to a seed swap then.
Yep.
Okay.
So typically with vegetable seeds, the thing is if they're stored well, they're going to be fine. Everything, like these have expiry dates on them, but like, let's be honest, seeds don't have expiry dates. They're just, their efficiency in the way that they germinate is going to slowly go down. They're not going to last forever, but as long as you're storing them, you're keeping them in a cool, dry place, and they're not getting wet, they're not being exposed to temperature changes, you're good for a couple of years.
Okay,
if you're going to a seed swap, you would just want to package them into small packets. You want to make sure you label them with what the vegetable is, if you know what type it is, and the germination or the days to, come on, Taylor, the days to harvest. It typically for example, this tomato is 54 days to harvest. Every seed packet typically will tell you. Try and add that on because that's going to help somebody figure out when they need to be started or, you know, roughly when they're going to harvest them. It depends on the seed swap. Some have, you know, rules, some don't. I went to one at Hamilton CD Saturday a couple of weeks ago and I got some snapdragons that had no information and you know, I'm growing them right now, no problem. So that would be a good thing to bring to a seed swap. Yeah. You guys have any more questions? No? Well, you guys know where to find me if you guys do have any questions. I'm so grateful for all of you joining me tonight. I hope you learned something. And the recording for this will be up on YouTube. So if you want to go back and like look at anything, feel free to. Also part one's there. And there's also some other sessions that were hosted in previous years about very specific topics that are on there too. And we're hoping to really, really ramp up the education this year. That's actually why I'm here. So, you know, I'll share all of the information that I have, and we'll also, you know, have guest speakers and different workshops and things like that. So, yeah, I hope that you guys go home now and you get your seeds all sorted. And yeah, I did see your setup. This is fine. This is one of them. It's a bit excessive, but can you even see? No. So we were gifted this. Yeah, we were gifted this by my partner's grandmother this year. So we outfitted with LEDs and the shelf tops will actually move. So I have milkweed and parsley and some snapdragons, onions, delphiniums, and lisianthus up there. And then I got these two this year that were gifted to me. So this is my first year growing in these two. So we'll see. Yeah. Anyways, okay, I'll let you guys go. If you guys have any questions, let me know. And yeah, we'll all connect about the pawpaw seeds. Just shoot me an email and we'll do a little swap. Okay?
That was great.
And keep us
Thank you.
posted on how the pawpaw seeds grow because I'm super curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to. And make sure you guys are both in our Facebook group. Honestly, I know you are. Joan, if you're not in our Facebook group, go join it. It's pretty fun. Cheryl just shares so much in there. So yeah, go join and you know, it'll definitely start picking up this season. And yeah, anyone has any questions, just shoot us a message, okay?
Thanks.
Okay, bye guys.
Thanks for everything, Taylor.
Yeah, absolutely.